which doesn't mean you won't have to share it. So I'm gonna share my screen.
No med so far.
Okay, so do you see the slides?
All is good.
See the slides.
Okay. So welcome everyone. This is the DRIP session. As you've probably seen in other, it's probably not the first meeting or the first session you're attending in that IETF. So please take the time to read if you've not done that earlier, the note well. And if you did not expect this session to be the RIP, then you're in the wrong session. I assume you've read it. So basically where we are into that working group, I'm just gonna go through the working group status, and then maybe I'm gonna ask the AD if they have anything to ask, and then we'll probably move to the presentations. So where we are now, so we had a requirement draft, which has been sent to the ASG, and now we're heavily working on the architecture draft, and I expect this session to be the one closing the, this working group last call. We'll probably have to go to, since we had a lot of changes, we might redo working group last call, but this is clearly the goal of this session, is to close this this document so that we can ship it. Then once we have those, I would call them preliminary documents, we can focus on the solution space, and we have an RID document. I think that's a pretty important one in that working group. It already has had some IoT and SecDir reviews, I guess, but as far as I've seen, they are not. We need some probably additional reviews. So, and we also have the auth document, so which is also one document that we should ship. Relatively in a relatively short delay once the architecture document is going to be sent. And then we have one document that is related to the registries, and this one needs to be adopted once but that does not prevent us to make some progress. Currently, I think we should get focused on architecture, RID, and authentications before we move to the other ones as working group documents. So a big change, I would say, with that working group is that we didn't have as many interim meetings as we used to have. I'm just wondering if anyone has wants to share if you think that more interim meetings would be needed, if they are useful to make the work progress, or if we're fine to do as we are doing on the mailing list. So if you have 2 minutes to say something around this organization of the working group, and then I will ask our AD, Eric, if he has anything to say. So Adam, please go. Okay.
Adam and I are thinking that some interims between now and the next IETF meeting would be useful. Not a ton of them, but not zero as we've had since the previous IETF meeting.
Okay. Good to know. Bob, yeah, I mean, we're not so many people here, so I mean, you can take the
Yeah.
when you see
Okay.
the line is full, go for it.
Uh, ASTM is working toward a face-to-face meeting on early October. So if we should be working at having the RID and the auth document well in shape for early October for us interacting with ASTM. Having face-to-face potentially in August/September to accomplish that could be important. Somehow or other, we want to have those two documents, not to wait to the November IETF meeting, but instead target our audience, which is ASTM, for their meeting in October. How do we do that? Face-to-face, maybe. Interims may be the answer to get everybody's attention on it.
Okay, right, yeah. So if I can say 2 words, I think those deadlines can be um, met quite easily. Um, it mostly depends on the respond res- respondness or responsiveness of the working group, and I think we're pretty good for now. But we had a huge gap, so but I don't see those October deadline as infeasible. But that's good to know. We have those deadlines. Shuai?
Hey, here. I also believe a internet is going to be very useful. In terms of the architecture, we have been quiet for so long, then get all the comments last month or so. Even though we give this feedback update, there will be no time for others to review. So I'll believe that would be definitely useful. The second thing I really want to say is I feel like there's repeated work when we do work in GitHub and the mailing list. Because in the GitHub, the comment we have not public, right? Not everybody actually has access or make a comment. Only a closed group people, either author or chairs, has access to it. Then in order to get a more comment or feedback with the mailing list, I have to actually compile a different mailing thread um, in the mailing list. So it's kind of repeated work. So it's also hard for authors and whoever commented to reply, and they have to close in both places. So I don't have a really good solution. Either we make the GitHub public, everybody, and whenever we have a comments, we refer to the GitHub link or the PRs, or we stick to the mailing list. Just my preference is
So
we keep it in one place.
yeah, so I mean the GitHub is public, but it doesn't mean that every people look at these issues. Um, I know that in some working groups, we have the bunch of issues that is regularly be sent to the mailing list. To be honest, I haven't found out how to configure that. So if anyone can
That would be
let me
nice.
know how to do that, that would be nice. Would it address which the concern you're raising?
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, if either we stick to one place or we can link to the mailing list and to the GitHub. Either way, so
Okay.
then we have one place for all the problem.
Okay. So I will need to ask some help. So anyone here in this working group is very familiar to GitHub. I can give a hand.
I know Carson or Hank. I don't think they are in the call right now. They actually
Okay.
has, I think, have like a script to make that work. They already, some of the group are already using that. Uh,
Yeah.
you can ask
I
for
think
them.
it's just okay. Okay. I will. I will ask some folks how to do that and make sure it's going to be working. Eric?
Yes, Daniel, as you asked me for my point of view on the DRIP working group, so first, quite happy to see at least one document coming into the ISG, even if there's still one discussion on it. I'm pretty sure it will be solved. Roman raised a nice question. It's just a matter of Stu and Roman to talk about it. So good. Regarding Bob, it's pretty much what you said, Daniel. We all know that it's only a matter of energy behind the draft, running those and new revised ID and so on to make them progress. So it really depends upon this working group. And the other part, the point raised by Shua about the GitHub, that's an issue that many working groups are facing. That's a concern of mine because normally this is the mailing list that is the official media. This is where the consensus needs to be reached. Of course, nothing prevents authors and editors and everyone to participate on the issue tracking of the GitHub. But don't forget the consensus is basically made on the mailing list. So the balance is not easy to reach, and we need to work on this in working group by working group, audience by audience. Some audience are more used to GitHubs, some are less. That's all I wanted to say here. Happy to see this working group going forward, and maybe we need some more interims if we want to get some October deadline, even if they are not IETF deadline. But I understand that other SDOs are important.
Okay, good. I've taken the point. So the agenda. Yeah, we probably need someone to take some notes. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Daniel, I just want to say one thing before we move on. I just pulled up the DRIP working group repository in GitHub. The Arch document is indeed private. Shuai is correct. It is a private group. You have to add people manually to it. But we'll discuss it off list or off
okay.
On list. So continue. Okay,
right. So looking at the agenda, I'm asking if anyone can take some notes. We would like to have maybe a minute taker. I'm not sure we need a jabber one, but a minute taker would be good. And as soon as we have a minute taker, I will give the floor to Bob.
And sorry to bug you, Daniel, we do need a minute taker. Now, this session is recorded, so if somebody wants to take the minutes after the meeting, it's still doable, but we need to get the minutes, and we cannot start without a volunteer on this. And Med is unable to join, so we have only one chair today. So we cannot rely on the poor Daniel, who is doing a one-man show today, or tonight in my case.
We can have 2 minute takers that share the load.
Okay. Daniel, I can do it if somebody can take a note when I'm present.
Anyone can help? Shuai?
Presenting. This is Adam.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so we move to
Okay. Greetings. Am I coming through clear?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, this is a presentation of the latest draft that I posted on Sunday. This is version 808, and it was submitted on Sunday. So it's we only had a little bit of time to read it. So let's review the changes and what I need to do for 09. Please, okay. remember, our target audience for this document is people outside the IETF. It's the regulators and the manufacturers of the unmanned aircraft systems that this is targeted to. So we need to understand. They need to understand this technology and what is gained for using HIT remote ID over alternatives. So read this document as an IETF outsider might. Um, Help me get where I get lost in the weeds. Look at this document and say, what do I need maybe to expand upon? What do I need to improve my references to? Maybe not do references, there's expanded text, but remember that our audience are manufacturers of the UAS. Why should they take this approach versus just putting their manufacturer ID in or just using UID? Why should they go to trustworthy? Why should the regulators want this in their systems and so forth? So remember, our target audience for this is not the IETF. It's the people who are going to be using it. Next slide. So what are my updates? Most of the dependencies have moved to the core. I've pretty much just done a move. And note that RFC diff gets lost when you make these sorts of moves. It does know any changes I made in dependencies, it did not highlight. So you really got to go through it. This sort of a change, I don't see how RFC diff works with it. I made a major cleanup of the IANA considerations. This document adds to the HIP registry. So I put very explicit instructions to IANA on what exactly they need to change in the registry for that. There's some minor realignment to changes made in the requirements. I've had a number of comments about X509 section, which shows that I wasn't getting across about X509. So I hope I have improved the text there. And I've cleaned up the text elsewhere a bit as well. Next slide. So dependencies to the core document, this is mostly a cut and paste, which is really easy to do when you're using XML. You just collapse the section. It works fine. But it was just moving them around with very little editing. However, I did consolidate the CTA 2063-A sections. I had it in 2 places. Now it's only in 1 place. That I did consolidate. I'm not done yet, but at least now you're only going to see that in 1 place. All these sections still need editorial review because for the most part, I just moved them. I did not do much in the way of editing the content. And I really need to work over the new section 6, which is the proof section. Adam and I really need to fine tooth that and make sure we got it done well. Adam has some ideas on some better naming, so we'll do that. And I need to align that with section B, which is related information. So I know about that. Now the IANA considerations. I mentioned that Drip Grid HHITs makes important changes to the HIP IANA registry. So the text in IANA considerations and throughout now better instruct IANA on what is needed. I've copied from other documents I've done and elsewhere, and I think I have a good set of IANA instructions. So please review this. Note that I am one of the IANA HIP registry experts along with Jeff. So other eyeballs on it because it's like, yeah, I would approve it. But that is not the point. So please, people, take a look at what I did in IANA considerations. EDDSA, it's still a draft. For those who are on SAG yesterday, Ira posted that in the post-quantum workshop, NIST post-quantum workshop in June, NIST did say, oh, we're sorry for the delay. We expect to get this done soon. And this is important because we are using EDDSA We're putting it, pointers to it for IKO in their digital identity, in their, and we'll go into their certificate policy. And they don't want to reference an IRC. They want to reference a FIPS document. So just so that you know that ECDSA really couldn't work for this. EDDSA has the features we need, but EDDSA is just an IETF IRC. It's not yet a FIPS standard, but you've been told, finally, soon. And it does affect IKO work and in their certificate policy, and where this also plays it. Next. Expanding the X509 comparison. Comments made it clear that I was not clear. Hopefully the text introduction is better now. Look at it, see if you see how you read it and what you get out of what I say. I do not want to labor the point, as this is the document on RID using HHA, not X509. But note elsewhere in the UAS UTM ecosystem, X509 certs are important, so there will be a connection some way or another. And this may mean either some additional work, either here or in a separate draft. I really enjoyed the Danish BOF, and there might be some interesting things we can pull off with Dane for what we need to do. But that's TBD. But again, look at what I've done. Do you understand what I am trying to say? So what needs to be done? The DNS examples in the draft. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Does it make sense to you? Is this a reasonable way to do it? The hits as the 602.063 numbers. Adam says he has a Python script almost ready for me, and it's almost working, so I'll need to get that from Adam and see how it works to see if I can then have examples to put into this section as a result. So stay tuned on that. I don't have to ask him to do the Python, as Adam has him busy off in one of his many corners helping me out here without bothering to tell me. Thank you, Adam. I'm looking forward to getting that Python script. But look for other things that you see that I need to do. Next slide. And I really need to tighten up the proof section or loosen up with more text. And people need to understand this. But there's also a question, how much of this belongs in the RID document now that we had Adam's auth document? Does this section really belong in RID, or do I reference the auth document and we rip almost all of this out of the RID document? That's an important point in conversation, and I want comments and feedback and guidance on that before I spend a lot of time improving this section. And there's some other things I need to fix and expand, and like it would. For those of you who have not been noticing hints that Stu, Adam, and I have been making, ASTM is now invalidating on version 1.1 of the remote ID standard. This will almost for sure come out still this year, so we F3411-21. How long is it? No. If we go right through the balloting right and we don't have to reballot, it could come out fairly quickly. When it's published, you'll see that I have to make changes in the RID document, and Adam's going to make changes in his auth document to match up with what we were able to get them to do. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we got enough of what we wanted. Magnus made some comments in his sector review about some things, and Adam has given me some Python scripts. Do I put those Python scripts right in the document? The HCA Gen Python script is 249 lines long. Do I put that right in the document, or do we put that in GitHub with some pointer? How do we handle something like that in our documents now? So that's more for our AD and our chairs, how they want to handle. Adam also has a collision resistance script that we've used. Magnus asked about, by issue, about the second pre-image attack. I haven't seen anything good in the literature about that. And all we've done, if we can't generate collisions, hash collisions, what's the chance of getting second image attacks? So, but that's that part. So what do we need to do for that? Do we put these scripts in the document, which would blow the document up a lot of pages, or do we put them on the GitHub, and do we reference them in the GitHub? Guidance, please. The next note about HITs to CTA numbers, Adam says he's got something for me, so we can extract it. I have to work on it, but I don't have to ask for help other than Adam getting me the script. There are a couple other things in the sector review that I need to take to the CFRG list. There's the hash size discussions, and a few other things. These are 20-year-old issues. What does a small hash mean? What do the collisions mean? And it gets also then to the registry, that how we're counting on the registry to eliminate duplicates and to defend against the second image attack, somebody actually being able to pull it off. So that completes the changes which I've made in draft 08. Where I think I need to go for draft 09, I hope to be able to focus in the next few weeks to get an 09 out based on comments, which means, please, everybody, get some comments.
Okay,
Questions?
thanks. So I see Eric in the queue. Please, Eric.
Thank you both for the summary there and the update. Regarding the crypto forum, I think this is really mandatory. Magnus has a good point there. So get to the crypto forum research group is SRP as soon as possible as an early review. Now regarding the Python script, I am really ambivalent there. It's small, so it could be an appendix into the RFC. Of course, you understand the copyright of the RFC. Now I am perfectly fine as well if it's on the public GitHub, where it's a license allowing everyone to run it basically. But it's not me to decide on this specific aspect.
Okay.
The working group and your side, this is your code.
I'll take it to the list. I'll ask for what people want to do. We'll make the Python scripts available so people can say, yeah, it's only 240 lines long. Put it in the document or something like that.
Yeah, that's yeah. I think it's probably the right way to ask the mailing list. I think if we have some code, unless we want to use that code to explain what we're saying, if we want to run it, it's always better to have a link. So in any case, I'd like the link into the RFC. Well, that's it. That's how we want to use it. Regarding a code of 1 mega, did you mention? So 200 line is fine. Is the doable? Larger codes might be a little bit tricky.
I don't know how big Adam's other scripts are. Adam will have to speak up because he hasn't given me those other scripts. I just know he's done the work for us, and it's just the one that he's given us. So I'll just see how big they are. Yeah, the script that he did is that we ran through, was able to run through 1 million HIT generations and determined that there were no collisions within that 1 million generated. So we're not getting any hash collisions in a population that size. That was what that was about. And that's partial answers to Magnus's question.
So next, I think it's we can go to the architecture document. Shuai, do you want to present?
We'll do that.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Someone just All right. I think Adam is taking over the notes, right? Right. So this is the update since our first working group last call. Next slide, please. So currently we have Ruby 15. We have addressed a lot of comments. I would say most of editorial. There are a few major concerns from Stu. Just coming in a week after, a month before the meeting. So Bob and I tried to address it, and the Ruby 15 have some of the comments in there. I did see Stu has a reply yesterday. I haven't got time to review that yet. Maybe Stu can express his major concern from that email during the meeting. But anyway, so mostly I have compiled all the issues into in the mailing list as well as in the GitHub, the link. So I have managed to close with some feedbacks. So mostly, yeah. So that's all right. So I was looking for comments and feedbacks from those issues. So hopefully I can get some for the next revision. Next slide, please. So for this presentation, only one thing I actually want to bring up to the working group is something we have been discussed, never get a conclusion or never actually talk about that. It's regarding if we should treat HIT as the only one drip identifier in the IETF, because the primary means for me that is secondary, right? If there's no secondary, I think there's no point we have the primary. So that's one thing Bob has comment on. I also sent the question to the mailing list. I'm not sure if people saw that. Hopefully we can resolve at least this question in this meeting. Receive more comments. Next slide. Yeah, that's the only thing. So all the feedbacks, comments in the mailing list and GitHub. So please go there, look at it. If the improved text has addressed your concern. So maybe we can go back to slide 3, see if we can at least solve this problem regarding if HHIT is actually the primary one or which is the only one in IETF. Bob,
so I'm wondering.
Yeah.
So please explain what are the pros and cons and where the discussion is, so we can have maybe
I
some
would take
feedback.
discussion to the list on this. It's again my position that our audience is the UAS regulatory community. The IETF needs, in my highly biased opinion, needs to speak out as a voice to that community. Here's how we say to do the remote ID in a trustworthy, secure manner. Not here's one way. This is our way of doing it. I should point out that Qualcomm 3GPP is pushing 1609.2 as their way of doing it. They're not bringing their approach to IETF. They're doing it through 3GPP. So IETF way of doing it, 3GPP maybe way of doing it. And the pros and cons of each be discussed in the larger community, with the IETF saying this is how we see it to work with our technologies. We've been at this now 2 years. There have been no other approaches put forth. And so that's why I say this is our proposal, not our primary proposal. It is about truly about marketing.
Yeah, so I think the debate was that because it's an architecture document, it might be sufficiently generic to be reused by potential other solutions. Now, if you look at the architecture, it's I'm not so sure. I mean, if we were to come with another solution, it would have a major impact on the document. So my personal feeling is that we should not try to we should not try to say we are expecting to give the message that we're expecting multiple solutions to be standardized. It's not that we're really closing those solutions, but if another solution is coming, yeah, it might be integrated in a document that specifies how it's going to be integrated to the current heap, or if it's going to replace it completely or whatever. But so, yeah, I am sort of thinking that we should not try to open the door to something that is not necessary to be open.
Look at the MLS architecture. The MLS architecture shows the architecture for their proposal with the requirements. At one time, they actually had 2 different proposals on how to do it. They selected one, and the architecture is for the one they selected.
Adam, you want to say something?
Actually, Stu here because I'm sharing a computer with Adam. I just want to mention that the impetus for the creation of the DRIP working group started with my coming from the aviation community and going to Bob because I happened to be familiar with his work with HIP and such like, and I felt that a host identity tag was an eminently suitable identifier. And in the 2 years that it has been, no one has stepped forward with another one. And I fully agree with Bob that we should not weaken our position in dealing with other standards development organizations and regulators by obviously hedging our bets. We've got one on the table. It's the only one anyone has come forward with. It's eminently suitable. Let's just say so.
So on this one, why I do not disagree with you, Stu. There is one thing that is important in IETF is whether the charter is defined one solution or multiple solutions. It's really important to respect the charter, or we need to respect the or recharter the working group. Everything is possible, right? But it's really important, and if we don't follow it, it will cause problem later in the process. And now, one thing to remember the IETF, as soon as the document is adopted by an IETF working group, it's no more a document for ASTM, it's a document for the working group and later by the IETF community, right? So don't forget this. Now, those 2 things are not incompatible, right? But just we need to take care of this.
Yeah, so I can have a look at the charter right now, but I don't see this as going fundamentally against the charter.
Then that's perfect.
So let me check.
The charter, because Stu pulled it up on his other computer, is silent on whether it's one or many.
So that's the requirement.
Yeah, the charter refers to new or adapted identifiers, which is plural, but then it says we'll propose a standard document that describes the architecture, which is singular.
Yeah. So let me ask a question. Who is willing to? Who thinks that secondary is should be? Because I'm only hearing that secondary is primary is not so much needed. So do we have anyone that is pushing for having secondary?
I don't think that, Daniel, I don't think the primary versus secondary. It's whether we put primary or we don't put primary at all.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, currently I'm only hearing the point of view of people that do not want to open that door and want to remove this primary term. So I'm just wondering if we have anyone thinking that we should have this primary into being mentioned, because it looks like it's a controversial term. So maybe Shuai, do you know what is the reason some people were pushing for having primary?
Can you repeat the last sentence? Is there a reason what?
So my question was, as the editor of the document, and it's an issue we want to solve, do you know what are the arguments for keeping primary into the text?
Well, so I took over this draft long before the primary was there. So I don't understand the history why we have the primary in the first. I think we should ask ourselves why we have the primary in the first place. That's something I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm just did not join Drupal at the beginning. So the primary was there a long time ago. So the question, as I said, is we should ask ourselves why the primary is there at the beginning.
Yeah, it's probably a part of the document evolution, so I am not too worried that we changed the term.
Okay, then the second thing is I think is Bob's position, as I mentioned. It has been 2 years, as we discussed. Stu also has expressed his opinion that we don't have any, we haven't seen a second solution on this issue. So I would just drop it.
Okay, that's fine to me.
For the safe purpose, we can send this as to the mailing list, saying that we're gonna drop that unless we have we hear a different voice, and give a deadline for like a week or so after the meeting, right?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Anyone wants to add something or? No. So I expect to have version 15 next week.
Sorry, that I have a really bad connection here. So did you say version 15 for next week?
Yeah.
This is we have here the current one is version 15 already.
Okay, so that so we have all the latest changes, because I mean you started saying that you had some discussions with Adam and Sue.
Stu, yeah. So Stu sent his review back for 15. I don't have enough time to look yesterday. I'm just skimming through it. It looks like some editorial. I think Stu maybe has comment on the section 5 regarding more text regarding the architecture. I think my question is if Stu want to discuss on the list, or you want to explain a little more if the requested text is ready in the different draft, which I have no problem to just kind of rephrase it and put in the architecture. So this is the question: if the things that you requested is already there in the different draft, then I can just organize the language and put in the in section 5.
Okay, because my question is, if we can have a next version next week, we may ask for some people to review that version.
Yeah, that's really if Stu can give me a brief answer, or maybe in the list, because he sent it to us, right? Not in the meeting list. Then.
Yeah. So should I?
Yeah.
I can give you a real high-level short answer right now. I think your latest revision addresses almost all of my editorial nits, and it begins to address my substantive concerns. And I do not believe that you can further address my substantive concerns until the working group achieves a consensus on how we want to go. And I actually bring that up in my slides later.
Okay. Then I guess we need to listen to yours first, then, right?
Okay. So I guess.
Okay. You want me to go there next? Sure. Great.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I called this requirements and related issues. Next slide. Okay. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things I want to briefly talk about. We're doing some interoperability testing, some functional demos. ASTM is revising their F3411, as Bob alluded to. We have a discuss, and I'm hoping that Eric can get Roman to join us to explain his discuss. There is a more complete scenario figure, which I'm hoping will go into the architecture document. It went into and was pulled back out of the requirements document. I think it might help people, including Roman, understand the issue that led to Roman's discuss. Then I would like to suggest what I think the relationships ought to be between the various documents that we're working on. And then I think that leads into some very fundamental questions for the working group that we need consensus on before Shwai or I or Bob can really proceed. Next slide. Okay, so Adam worked with a UTM provider that had independently developed a baseline ASTM F3411 implementation. Our drip stuff is all basically enhancements to the ASTM F3411 standard. And Adam's implementation of F3411 with our drip enhancements successfully interoperated with the baseline F3411 implementation that was independently developed. Now, that doesn't say that our drip enhancements are interoperable with anybody, because as far as we know, so nobody else has yet implemented our drip enhancements, but it's a step in that direction. And the pictures below show where Adam and I are right now. We are out in the Great Plains, and people are flying lots of aircraft, and we're simulating lots more, and we are demonstrating, the drip work to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and so on and so forth. Okay, ASTM. The revision that they are balloting on right now has everything in it for drip to be a recognized extension. The UAS ID that is in the basic ID message, there were formerly 3 types. And we were asking for type 4 to be allocated for drip. They did not do exactly that, but they did something that works out nearly as well. They created a type 4, which is for a so-called specific session ID, as opposed to the type 3, which is a UTM system assigned ID. And then there will be subtypes of this type 4. And subtype number 1 in ASTM F3411 draft is IETF drip. Subtype 2 will be from IEEE. And then there can be other subtypes. The only cost to that is that the subtype index chews up one of our bytes. So the 20 bytes that we used to have for our identifier are down to 19 bytes, which still we fit an HIT at 16 bytes comfortably within that. And should somebody someday actually step forward within IETF with another proposed drip entity identifier, great. We've got 3 bytes that we can use to demultiplex between HITs and whatever they come up with. Then the authentication message in the ASTM standard, they've added a type 5 called specific authentication method, which is very similar to the type 4 specific session ID. This allows for numerous authentication formats to be devised, and Adam is expecting that we will want to register probably 4 subtypes for drip authentication. A type for a certificate, a type for a signed message, a type for this, type for that. The other thing that I want to mention while we're talking about the revision of this standard is that the FAA, which admittedly is only one of the civil aviation authorities in the world, but it's one of the major ones, they know they need help with session IDs. And we are hoping that we can submit our DRIP documents as so-called means of compliance, so that the FAA can say, oh yes, this is a way that we, the FAA, accept as a way of securely managing, issuing, and so on, session IDs. So anyway, the balloting is in progress right now on the revised standard. I just voted for it today in my ASTM hat, and the ASTM means of compliance draft is currently in review by the FAA. Any questions on this one before we move on? Okay,
I don't
great.
see the queue, so if anyone has a question, please.
Yep. Okay, so next slide then. Okay. Roman made a number of comments, and he also lodged a discuss.
Wait,
and
to interrupt you on this one, Roman just joined the call.
Yep.
Thank you.
So rather than me talk about that, perhaps Roman could step up to the microphone and explain his discuss.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Roman.
Sure. So the crux of my discuss is we provide some really nice, crisp security properties that we want in the requirements document, which is great. My concern is that there's a number of places in the document then that caveat that the strength of those requirements. And so what it sends the message to me that what we're saying is that these are best effort requirements, and that's a little inconsistent with, well, not a little, it's inconsistent with using RFC 2119 language. So if we say we must do the following, but then we say, oh, right, but if you can't, you can't, that's a should. And so that's the crux of it. And then I think in my follow-up mail to, I think the last bullet, which is you can't satisfy everything because you cut the underlying Ethernet cable. Yeah, that's completely understandable. But I think the way you manage making security guarantees with the fact that there's a layered architecture, or that you have dependencies, is that you draw some boundaries, some scope around which you provide the guarantees. And if those things are in the architecture outside of that bubble, the guarantees don't apply. So again, to the idea of kind of a cable cut with TCP, the TCP guarantee is about in-order delivery, assumes layer 4 behavior. It does not assume layer 1 behavior. And I don't know how to reconcile kind of that.
Yeah, so probably should. Med is the document shepherd for that one, so I can. It's not nice to do that to my co-chair, but so I haven't been following those discussions very closely. For sure, I tend to agree with Roman saying that we cannot have a must with exceptions, and it's something I really see well into those documents. Is there anything blocking on your point? Is a should having a should? Is it something? Is it going to be the end of the world in the requirements? I'm asking that to Adam, for example. Adam or Stu or Bob.
I hate to give implementers a carte blanche to not satisfy the requirement. I would like to somehow work out language that makes it clear that, when a particular link is present that allows this to be done, then you indeed must do it. But that link indeed will not always be present, and so you are not being required to do it when it is physically impossible to do it. And so I think that Roman's position and mine can somehow be reconciled with appropriate language, because when you can do it, it is indeed a must. But we just know for a fact that you won't always be able to do it due to the underlying physical connectivity scenario, and the physical connectivity is not under the control of a DRIP protocol.
And
Now
that's,
I understand
I completely agree with you, Adam. That's perfect what you're saying. So if you can provide language that more tightly draws the boundary around what is DRIP and what DRIP relies upon, that would clear up my concern.
Let me take a crack at it. I've been through this with Roman on other things. I know where he's coming from, and so see what I can do to help Stu out with the language nuances. Roman and I have been around this particular merry-go-round a number of times.
Sure have.
Right, and so this is actually Adam speaking. You were talking to Stu, but because we're sharing a computer today. I'm wondering, being somewhat naive on this, could you put should and then must directly after it? You should do this if the link is there, blah, 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 blah. And if it is there, you must be doing it. Is that like overlaying those two in the sentence make any sense? Asking from a naive perspective.
Here be dragons. Adam, we'll work it out. And we'll just take this off on the side and come back with some wording and see if we can get address Roman's points. I hear clearly where he's coming from.
Okay, right. So, yeah, Eric.
So I guess the only question that I have right now for the working group is, as editor of requirements, I don't feel empowered to change the numbered requirements to which we have agreed and that made it through working group last call. I feel empowered to make clarifications in the supporting prose text, right? So what I would like to know is it the working group's consensus that I can, in cooperation with Roman and Bob and so on, tweak the wording of the numbered requirements to clarify that musts are musts when they're physically possible given the lower layers, and they're not when they're not physically possible given the lower layers. I don't think that's doing violence to the intent of the numbered requirements, but I would like clearance from the working group to do so.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the chairs give you the clearance.
Putting boundaries, as Roman said, what are your boundaries for your must claims?
Yeah, no, I clearly see it's an editorial thing. Bob, are you going to look at that by next week, for example? Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, it's Stu, right? Stu and I will get together. First, Stu has to come back from North Dakota, and so we'll get cracking on it real quickly.
Okay, right.
Great.
So,
and Roman, thank you very much for joining us today.
Happy to do so. I mean, it's important work.
So, yeah.
I did have two more slides, Daniel.
Yeah. So,
okay.
But just before we move, I expect that we addressed Roman's comments by end of next week.
Yes.
Sounds feasible. Okay, good.
Okay, this is the more complete scenario figure that I think may help some people understand what the connectivity situation is. The thing on the left in a box is the UAS, which has two boxes inside of it, the unmanned aircraft and the GCS. And there's a C2 link between the unmanned aircraft and the GCS. Or maybe there's not, because there's also a link from the GCS to the internet and a link from the unmanned aircraft to the internet. Or maybe there's not. And so clearly the GCS must exercise command and control over the unmanned aircraft, but it can do it either over a direct wireless link, right? So you got a physical connection directly between the GCS and the unmanned aircraft, which we can then reuse for other DRIP purposes, or it may exercise C2 by the GCS talking somehow to the internet, through the internet, and then somehow from the internet to the unmanned aircraft. That can be the C2 path. And so it is things like that lead to these different scenarios where different things are possible or not possible. So I'm hoping we can at least get this figure into the architecture draft. Med felt that it was a bit too detailed for the requirements draft. So then next slide. This is just my opinion on how our documents ought to fit together. External inputs are on the left. We have regulations from CAAs, and we have another SDO's work in F3411. Those drive requirements. Once requirements are defined, we now can largely forget about F3411 and CAAs and derive from the requirements architecture. And once architecture is defined, we can then refine the elements that make up that architecture. And we have three key areas. The one that is furthest, the one that is least mature thus far is the registries. And then we have the authentication draft from Adam. And then we have the thing from Bob that is being called a RID draft, but I would assert that everything in DRIP is RID. And Bob's draft is really focused specifically on providing DRIP's entity identifier and using the hierarchical hit to do that. Now, there are other documents that we will produce for command and control and blah, blah, blah. That all, okay. And so here are the fundamental questions we have to address. Schwei's architecture, is this about cyber physical entities in general or UAS only? I don't have an opinion on that, but we need to know which we're talking about. And is it the DRIP architecture or only a DRIP architecture? Again, I don't have an opinion. Should we be using normative language in it? That we've had some back and forth on that. Here's my key issue. We can't, in an architecture document, just list possibilities. We could use apples or we could use pears. No, we must specify what will be used so as to enable interoperability. Otherwise, it is not an architecture. And this mostly is in section 5 at this point. We need to cover not only identifiers and registers, we also have to talk a little bit in the architecture about authentication formats to lead to that other document. On Bob's remote ID, is it supposed to really cover all of remote ID, identifiers, registries, authentication formats, and everything? In which case, why is it merged into architecture? Or is it going to specifically cover identifiers only, which is my belief what it should be? And then is hierarchical hit, we already talked about this a little bit, the DRIP entity identifier or only a DRIP entity identifier? I think we've converged on it is the identifier. What will hopefully become Michael Pelage's draft, which is currently Adam's placeholder draft, is this domain name based DRIP registries, and there could be other kinds of DRIP registries, or it is DRIP registries. Adam, as the current author of the draft, has a preference for it being domain name based DRIP registries because he does indeed anticipate that there may well be registries based upon other underlying technologies, especially as we move beyond just broadcast RID to also network RID. And then his authentication formats document, are these DRIP authentication formats in general, or are they only broadcast authentication formats? And again, it's Adam's preference that it be DRIP broadcast authentication formats, because as we move into network RID, we're going to have more degrees of freedom and we can accomplish more because we're not in tiny little packets. And then finally, we're going to need to come up with a means of compliance document, which is how to use the technical standards to satisfy the regulations. We need to do this at least for the FAA, probably for other CAAs. And the question is, could Bob's draft be tweaked to serve this role as the one area where the FAA admits they need help above and beyond ASTM's work is on the session IDs, which is exactly what Bob's identifier would serve as. So that's everything I've got. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. So I think we have to conclude that session, but I guess that we have most of the answers to the question you raised. Do you have a specific question we need to address? And if so, I suggest you put that on the mailing list. But to me, we mostly have answered the question you're mentioning on this slide. Am I correct?
Mostly, we just need to answer definitively the questions on the architecture document so that can move forward, and we can do that on the list.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So I think we can conclude this meeting. I'm asking if our ADs, Eric, has anything to say.
Already bailed. He had to go to an IESG.
Okay. So I see Shuai on the queue list. So Shuai, do you want to say something? It's probably an old end. So I think we can adjourn the meeting. Hello?
Yes, sorry. I just wanted
Please
to
go.
confirm our decision regarding last slide. So are we gonna take that to the meeting list, at least for the architecture for now?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we need to move forward this document.
Okay.
So please be aggressive.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.